release of the latest Crow remake from 2024, we now got 5 Crow movies that we got from the same franchise with different actors and none following up from the story. And so let's rank them all from my least favorite to my favorite. Hey everyone, welcome to Cinema, where we focus on a film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in comments below what you think of the Crow franchise. Have you seen all of them, or have you seen any of them? Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. But going in last place, we have The Crow Wicked Prayer. Now this one has Edward Furlong portraying the Crow, and while Edward Furlong can be a good actor, especially in American History X, a great movie for its own worth, Edward Furlong just does not fit the vibe of what is going on with the nature of the character, whether it's a miscast or just the portrayal, and also the makeup design just is unfitting to the design of what I imagined a Crow to be like, a dark, bleak, sinister type of character. And what you're going on about with this, it goes about a unique twist with the Indian reservation and a satanic cult that really gets involved with this bike rider gang and getting involved with what ultimately leads to the Crow forming in the revelation that is going about. There's interesting ideas and things that go about along the way, but it's certainly the most uncompelling of the franchise. It goes about some weird shenanigans, a weird blend of the drama and goofiness that is the comic book feel that just does not blend well at all, and ultimately feels uncompelling with the nature of the flow of the story just being actually boring and ultimately cringeworthy in certain moments here and there. And at number 4, we have The Crow Salvation. This one has Eric Mabius. Now, his role isn't too bad. This is more of a comic book feeling for the franchise as a whole, what you're getting out of this particular movie. And there's a sense of mystery throughout what you're getting throughout this crime, the involvement of the police and other things that goes about along the way. And it does have its own sense of trying to get an understanding of what it's going for, but there's ultimately a little bit too much ridiculous nature to where it is going about, and not necessarily a good blend of what it's trying to tackle. And there's some weird things or inconsistencies with the nature of the power, as well as just the flow of the story and the natural ideas, what you're getting with certain explosions, certain actions that don't necessarily make as much sense, and just the flow of what ultimately comes of how Eric Mabius pulls off his performance. It can be good to a silly nature, but doesn't feel like it really hones in on getting into the ideas of the darkness of what the Crow is really representing for the film and what it's connected to for the comics book as a whole. And at number 3, we have The Crow City of Angels. Now this one is a decent one for its own nature. It's certainly not great. Vincent Perez may be having the best performance, although he still feels a little miscast. While it is a little bit more serious with the story that is pulling off, he doesn't feel like he has the proper voice for the Crow. And I'm speaking not about the vocal voice, but the voice of how the appearance really looks and how he's really pulling off the lines as a whole. He really can make the nature of the darkness and bleakness of the environment around, even though it's uninspiring by the way everything gets sewed up. It feels like we've seen it before, even as the sequel of sorts to the first one. That this is the second one that they made, but it's a remake to the own standards of telling the same story and not feeling very original and not offering anything new necessarily, except just pulling about this different drama. And that works a little bit more because it feels like it's having the right motive, even if there's not necessarily the comic book feel as much as what the original or the whole general vibe of coming from a comic book adaptation is based on. And so therefore it sort of has a mixed messaging that ultimately is more bad than it is good, but it is the more sustainable if I was to rank any of the original sequels of sorts to the remakes of what we got back then. And at number 2 we have The Crow 2024 remake. Now this is certainly much better than what we gotten of the original remakes, but that doesn't hold anything to this film. It still goes about the same relative storyline. Bill Skarsgård is relatively good for the own standards of what he has to offer, but it takes too much time within the film trying to explore the love relationship of these two characters, of who he's investing his life in, and yet it's still following the same story. And so what all of the other films sacrifice the time and don't need to explore and try and convince you that they love each other, the writing isn't great within that relationship. So all that extra time spending with them is just completely unearned. It just feels inauthentic the way they portray that loving relationship, and ultimately leads into the same relative story. It goes into a bloody mayhem that can be a lot more entertaining, not necessarily necessary for the nature of what you're getting. But there is a comic book feel that does have the right approach, but still doesn't blend in a good sense of writing with the characters and how you're building up upon the villain. And so therefore it still becomes somewhat useless to the nature of how you're pulling off the character. Bill Skarsgård is closest to the best of the Crow performances, but that doesn't necessarily hold a high standard when the writing doesn't give a good feeling to how you're pulling off the character as a whole within this one. But that leaves at number 1, the original Crow, of course. Now this one, I'm not looking at as a masterpiece, at least for having seen it for the first time, but it does definitely have a great blend of the approach for this comic book feel, for this comedy, while also having a nice, dark, and bleak environment that really blends in well to the nature of the scenery, the cinematography, while certain things are definitely downgraded by the lack of technology they had to make this film at the time. It can still look like the best looking of the films because of what they did with the director, how they pulled off, and Brandon Lee certainly has a great performance that really wins over any of them, just having all these acrobats and flips or other things that goes out the way with great writing, what they do, and not spending too much time on the loving relationship, what he had in the connection to his girlfriend in the past. And so how they portray that through different flashbacks is just the right amount of time that goes about a genuine sense of seeing their chemistry, how it works together, and why he has the proper motivation to really take vengeance on those who took his wife. And it goes about an interesting realm of world building, how it builds upon the touch of the Crow and how it becomes attached to that character. Well, there's not a sense of strong answers to how that end ultimately works. It is a relative superhero genre thing that you don't have to really take it too seriously for that nature, because the rest of the story, while it still follows that rule of once the Crow gets attached and becomes undead, he does get consistent with the rules that are given to them, and so that ultimately pays off. And the follow-up of how it builds and establishes the villains, while they're not top tier villains of any sort, they still have a little bit of intent and a way of going about their own ways of trying to kill him, and then also having a natural way of finding out his weakness. That ultimately really pays off in the end, and the bleak and dark setting blended in well with the comic book feel just works well and effectively by the end of the day. And so that's just my ranking of the Crow movies from my least favorite to my favorite. Let me know down in the comments below if you've seen all the Crow movies, how you would rank them, and let's have a nice discussion. Be respectful in the comments below. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.